In Belgrade tonight, Milosevic is told the price of peace. Russian and European envoys present him at last with an agreed plan. America steps up the pressure, hinting it may commit ground troops. Good evening. The pace of the diplomacy of peace has quickened, but should it fail, America is already planning how to step up the war. President Clinton meets his service chiefs tomorrow to discuss all the options, including a land invasion. But the main drama was being played out tonight in Belgrade as peace envoys from Russia and the European Union put before President Milosevic the first peace plan on which Russia, America and Europe have been largely agreed. The Yugoslav president is said to be studying the offer, and they'll meet again tomorrow. John Simpson reports from Belgrade, where his report has been seen but not changed by the authorities.
The first Western leader to come to Belgrade since the Kosovo crisis began arrived to an impressive reception. The Yugoslav government sent some of its top people out to greet him. The plane bringing his Russian partner landed soon afterwards. Viktor Chernomyrdin has always come to Belgrade to negotiate as Moscow's representative. Mr. Ahtisaari is here now to provide the hard edge of NATO's determination. This would not, Mr. Chernomyrdin said, be their last visit here. Instead, it would be the start of a working process. For his part, Mr. Ahtisaari was pretty vague.
And we hope that after these talks, we can proceed to the peaceful development in the region.
But afterwards, speaking in Finnish, he said he didn't expect there'd be any agreements to sign on this trip, nor an end to the bombing. The two men went straight round to the old royal residence in Belgrade to meet President Milosevic. The agreement he came to last week with Mr. Chernomyrdin was much too favourable to the Serbian side to be acceptable to NATO. Now Mr. Ahtisaari is here to inject some reality into the talks. There's no doubt that people here want a deal badly, but public opinion isn't the important thing for President Milosevic. He wants a deal he can present as a victory, which will leave him in power when the war's over.
The peace plan taken by the EU and Russian envoys to President Milosevic was thrashed out during lengthy talks in Bonn between the two diplomats and the American Deputy Secretary of State, Strobe Talbot. Before leaving Bonn, Mr. Chernomyrdin suggested they'd reached a compromise on the makeup of any peacekeeping force for Kosovo. David Schuckman is in Bonn.
They talked most of the night before agreeing that it was worth going to Belgrade. On the left, the EU's envoy, on the right, Russia's, and only in fits and starts did enough of a common approach on Kosovo appear between them. This lineup of international envoys, an image flashed around the world, was meant to tell Mr. Milosevic that he has no choice, that he must accept international demands. The EU envoy, the Finnish President Martti Ahtisaari, emerged first to confirm the trip was on, that the talks with Russia had succeeded.
They lasted late last night, and so we missed a little bit of night's sleep, but it was worthwhile.
And with that, Mr. Ahtisaari headed for Belgrade with the latest proposals. The details of the peace plan have not been disclosed, but they're bound to involve the precise timing of a ceasefire in the NATO air campaign, the arrangements for the withdrawal of Serb forces and verifying that they've gone, and the details of the international security force for Kosovo. NATO insists that it must be at the core. The Russian envoy Viktor Chernomyrdin did a good job of looking in charge. In fact, he's given ground on when NATO's bombing should end and on NATO's presence in Kosovo. Yet he introduced a new demand that Russian troops would operate in Kosovo separately from NATO, an idea the alliance doesn't like. One of NATO's central demands is that Kosovo should be policed by a force built around the alliance to reassure the Albanians, with one simple command structure. But the Russian plan for its troops to operate under separate command raises the spectre of dividing Kosovo, a partition that could see Russia's forces in the north and NATO's in the south. NATO's objections to this came quickly.
There needs to be unity of command for this to be genuinely effective, in order for it not to slip down a slippery slope into either partition or ineffectiveness or worse.
The emphasis here today has been on the common ground between the West and Russia, to present a united front in Belgrade, and to an extent that's been possible, because the Russians have given ground on some key points. The problem, though, is that there still isn't a single international peace plan, and until there is, Mr. Milosevic may well try to exploit the differences. David Truckman, BBC News in Bonn.
President Clinton has announced that the United States will contribute 7,000 troops to the force deployed in Kosovo if President Milosevic accepts a peace agreement. But tomorrow Mr. Clinton will meet his military chiefs to discuss a range of other options, including for the first time the possible use of troops for a ground invasion. And he gave President Milosevic another tough warning about accepting the deal.
There is a clear choice before the Serbian leader. He can cut his losses now and accept the basic requirements of a just peace, or he can continue to force military failure and economic ruin on his people. In the end, the outcome will be the same.
Well, I'm joined from Washington by our correspondent Stephen Stacker. Stephen, are these noises that the Americans are now making about the ground option just a gambit, part of the poker game?
Well, it's impossible to tell, Peter, but what I can tell you is that in a somewhat unusual move, White House officials have signaled that tomorrow the president is going to meet in a formal session with all his top military chiefs, and they're saying that not only is the deployment of the 7,000 troops in the peacekeeping force, potential peacekeeping force on the table, but they're also going to look at all the options for a possible invasion of Kosovo involving a ground force which would fight its way in. So clearly that's tough talk from the White House tonight, and it's an indication that they want to put increasing pressure on Slobodan Milosevic as he considers his position in the light of this diplomatic initiative in Belgrade.
But why has the nation that hasn't wanted to risk a pilot below 15,000 feet, why is it now even talking about putting thousands of men on the ground as invaders?
Put simply, Peter, because the air war isn't working, or at least is not working as fast as the White House and military officials here would like it to be working. There is a pressure from the calendar here. People believe in Washington that if the air war is not successful and Milosevic doesn't back down by the middle of June, then there will have to be serious preparation for a ground force to be deployed in Kosovo. That's the pressure of time that the United States is working under, and it's a pressure being felt in NATO headquarters as well.
Now back to the attempts to find a diplomatic solution to the war in Kosovo. The American Secretary of State, Madeleine Albright, said the ball was now in Slobodan Milosevic's court. And more than ever, the Serbian leader holds the key to a peaceful outcome to the current conflict. Our diplomatic correspondent Bridget Kendall looks at the man, what drives him, and how he'll respond to the latest diplomatic proposals.
Denounced as a dictator worthy of Hitler, called a war criminal by prosecutors in The Hague, he's still the only person in Belgrade with real power. And now NATO and Russia seem on the way to resolving their differences. It's Slobodan Milosevic who's the key to any peace deal. And it's Milosevic, as the US Secretary of State admitted today, who's the hardest to second guess.
The big question that remains to be answered is how Milosevic will react. The ball is in his court. Once this elaboration of the conditions has been presented, and we're just going to have to see how he reacts to it.
No one seems to know just how much pressure the Yugoslav president is under. 70 days of NATO bombing have, by all accounts, decimated Serb air defences and other military targets and hit hard at power supplies and infrastructure. Even hospitals haven't been spared. As food queues grow and unemployment in Serbia rises, no wonder there's less enthusiasm for the war. Yet if NATO reckoned pressure from the public or from his own generals would make President Milosevic cave in, it hasn't happened yet. Lord Owen, who negotiated face-to-face with him for 3 years over Bosnia, says the point is Kosovo is a special case.
When I discussed Kosovo with him, as I did on frequent occasions, it was always the most difficult of all the conversations, because he feels vulnerable. This is the issue on which he rode to power. This is the issue on which he, I suspect, realizes he could lose power.
10 years ago, it was his decision to send in tanks to abolish autonomy for Kosovo Albanians that made Milosevic a hero for Serb nationalists. To give up Kosovo now would be a far bigger price to pay than handing over Bosnia to NATO. This time he may hold out as long as he can.
I don't think Milosevic is in a situation where he feels he has to give way at any price at these negotiations. I think he still will only really take us totally seriously when it's clear we're ready to go in with ground troops.
And even then, isolated by the world, promised only a war crimes trial if he ever leaves Serbia, it's possible he sees this war as his last stand.